all South Africans, black and white, we must talk about the persistence of racialized inequality 20 years after the end of apartheid. And if we believe this government has failed to redress apartheid's legacy, then we must be able to say so as well. Democrats, fellow South Africans, there can be no conversation more important than this one. It is a conversation that we must keep having until the structural inequalities of our society have been flattened. Sadly, this conversation is interrupted every time a racist incident hits the headlines and explodes onto our social media. Suddenly, we're back to square one. The injury of racial inequality is compounded by the insult of racism. It is like pouring salt into a deep wound. No wonder so many people are angry about racism. I am one of them. We must be angry about the acts of people who are racist. So let me be clear. I want to say this. This far and no further. It is indeed time that we draw a line in the sand against racism. Now I know that there are many people in South Africa of all races who truly believe in non-racialism. I know that the vast majority of white South Africans don't think like Penny Sparrow does. And I know that many South Africans are playing their part to redress the legacy of the past. But I also know that for every racist incident that makes the front pages and trends on Twitter, there are hundreds that don't. I know that there are people who talk to each other around braais as if we're still living in the 1970s. Every incident of overt racism, there are thousands of instances of casual, everyday racism. It manifests itself in simple ways like talking down to people, laughing when people pronounce an English word differently, not bothering to acknowledge people. In fact, believing somebody's accent is a sign of their intelligence. These, Democrats, are all subtle forms of racial superiority. And it is time we all acknowledge how damaging they are. Because repeated over time, they erode the goodwill that once existed between us. It is equally important to acknowledge that racism is not the preserve of one group. To say that black people are not capable of prejudice is itself a twisted form of racism. As Advocate Thuli Madonsela reminds us, being a victim of systemic racism and structural racial discrimination does not exempt you from being a racist. I could not agree more. You see, we all have the capacity for greatness, but equally so, we all have the capacity for prejudice. That is what equality is about. So, fellow South Africans, Democrats, bagaetsho, I still believe that most people in our country, black and white, feel a deep sense, an abiding sense of a shared destiny. More than anything, they want this imperfect union to succeed. And yet, we're talking past each other. We're not listening to each other. And in fact, when we don't listen, it's like the meaning is lost in translation. Is that any road to reconciliation starts with a conversation. So over the coming weeks, as leader of the official opposition, I will initiate a dialogue on race entitled Stand Up, Speak Out, involving South Africans from all walks of life. These dialogues will not be dominated by public reps, nor will it be conducted under a party political banner. People have had enough of politicians telling them how to think and how to feel.